When I first moved into 49 Whispering Pines Drive, I wasn't looking for conflict. I was looking for quiet. After 20 years in a downtown condo with paper-thin walls and street noise that never slept, I wanted space, grass underfoot, a garden, a place where I could sip black coffee on a porch and hear birds instead of sirens. The house was not just a single-story ranch style, with fading shutters and a yard that needed taming, but it sat on a generous corner lot with an arc-shaped driveway, and just enough distance from the neighbors to breathe. It was, in my mind, perfect. Then came Karen Mitchell. She introduced herself the first day, blonde bob cut, clipboard in hand, and a smile that felt more like a warning than a welcome. "I'm Karen, vice president of the HOA. We like to keep things orderly around here." She didn't ask what I did or where I moved from. She asked if I was aware of the architectural standards for mailbox design. I wasn't. I'd installed a black Rotain one that matched the shutters. Apparently, it wasn't on the approved styles list. "You'll need to replace that," she said, tapping her clipboard. Before the next inspection cycle, that was the first time I saw the glint in her eye that wasn't about order. It was about control. In the weeks that followed, Karen treated my property like a daily to-do list. Trash bins must be concealed, hose reels must be behind the side gate front, lawns must be mowed every 7 days, whether permitting or not. I tried to keep up, but every compliance triggered another notice. And every notice came with a thinly veiled threat. Failure to comply may result in fines or legal action, but none of that compared to what started happening with my lawn. My driveway was a simple loop wide enough for one car, edged by 2 narrow patches of grass. Not ideal for turnarounds, but manageable. Most guests parked on the street like normal people. Karen was not most people. It began innocuously, her white Lexus RX cutting across the front corner of my lawn while she exited a cul-de-sac. At first, I thought she'd misjudged the turn. It had rained that week. Maybe she slipped, but it happened again and again. Every morning at 7:15 without fail, she clipped the grass to save herself a 3-point turn. By the second week, a trail of crushed blades marked her path. By the third, tire ruts gouged the soil. I confronted her on a Tuesday. She had just stepped out of her SUV, sipping a green smoothie, perfectly manicured nails tapping at her phone. "Karen," I said calmly, "you've been driving over my lawn." She looked up without guilt or concern. "It's a corner lot. You should install curbing if you don't want traffic where it's private property. And you're the traffic." She raised her brows. "You're overreacting. It's barely a few feet. I'm late for Pilates." With that, she walked off heels, clicking on the pavement like punctuation marks on an insult. That night, I filed a formal complaint with the HOA. 2 days later, I received their response in a crisp envelope, claim unsubstantiated due to lack of photographic evidence. Attached was a pamphlet on community harmony. I installed a camera on the porch. When she noticed it, she filed her own complaint. The HOA issued me a violation. Exterior surveillance must not create discomfort or invade privacy. Another $150 fine. It was surreal, like falling into some bureaucratic quicksand where reason didn't matter and the rules only applied to those not in power. The damage to my lawn deepened, not just physically, but symbolically. This wasn't about grass, this was about territory. And she was marking hers. Each drive over was a silent declaration. "You can't stop me." She was right. Not yet, but I'd been underestimated before. In another life, I'd navigated far more tangled systems than a suburban HOA. I'd learned the art of waiting, of watching, of knowing that sometimes the best counterattack isn't loud, it's meticulous. I didn't need to win by force, I just needed to outmaneuver her, and Karen had just taken her last shortcut across my lawn. Karen didn't slow down. If anything, she doubled down, turning her daily lawn-crushing routine into a deliberate act of dominance. Her Lexus carved deeper and deeper into the corner of my property, leaving behind sunken tracks and clumps of dislodged turf like scars. My once green lawn was now a ruined patch of brown and broken roots. I receded. She rolled over it. I added orange safety flags as a warning. She flattened those too. When I put up small black garden stakes to protect the corner, she filed another complaint. Unauthorized hardscaping. The violation notice read, "Must be removed within 48 hours or face a $250 fine." It was absurd. She had caused the damage, yet I was the one being penalized for trying to prevent it. I appealed the fine. The board upheld it. Naturally, it wasn't just that Karen drove across my lawn. It was that she did it with absolute impunity. She knew the rules didn't apply to her because she had authored half of them, and the other half were vague enough for her to twist at will. Every time I pushed back, the board snapped its leash and barked in her defense. I started documenting everything. I saved emails, photographed every tire rut, kept a log of dates and times. I recorded her vehicle with time-stamped footage. I submitted the evidence in a formal package. The response: "While your concern has been noted, it appears your landscaping layout encourages vehicular turnarounds. It is the homeowner's responsibility to discourage misuse through approved modifications." I was livid. They weren't just ignoring the problem, they were blaming me for it. But I wasn't just angry, I was focused. I reread the HOA bylaws line by line. clause by clause. It was dry, bureaucratic sludge. But buried in that 63-page document was a single sentence that reframed the battlefield. Natural decorative elements under 24 inches in height may be installed in front yards without prior approval. My lips curled into a slow smile. It wasn't a loophole. It was a doorway. I made a call to a landscaping supplier just outside of town. They specialized in limestone boulders, natural, heavy, beautiful, and exactly what I needed. 3 days later, a flatbed truck arrived just after sunrise. The delivery guy looked skeptical. "You sure you want these up front?" I pointed to the battered lawn. "Dead sure." We placed 3 stones, each roughly 2 feet tall and weighing over 500 pounds, in a gentle arc across the corner. Not a wall, not a fence, just decorative boulders placed with tasteful spacing, mulch beds, and low-growing shrubs around their bases to sweeten the visual. Perfectly legal, completely immovable, and exactly in Karen's path. I stood there after he left, admiring the work. It looked serene, intentional, not aggressive, not angry, just resolved. That evening I sat on my porch, mug in hand, and waited. Karen drove by. Sunglasses perched high on her nose, white dog yapping in the passenger seat. She slowed. She stared. She didn't stop. The next morning, she didn't take the shortcut. She looped around like any normal driver. For 2 days, she played it safe. I started to believe, maybe, just maybe, the message had landed. But Karen wasn't wired for defeat. Not quietly. On day 3, I saw her Lexus at the end of the cul-de-sac pause just a little longer than usual. She revved the engine. I stood up, heart thudding. No way she gunned it. Forward time slowed. The car surged toward the corner like a missile. She thought she could bully her way through. She thought I'd installed lawn ornaments. She didn't know these were limestone sentinels. Sentinels solid, ancient, and utterly unforgiving. Then came the moment I had waited for. Metal met rock. The front bumper crumpled like paper. One wheel lifted clean off the ground, and the hood released a hiss of steam as the vehicle jolted to a stop with a horrible crack. Neighborhood went silent, and Karen erupted. Doors flung open. She stepped out in her pink tracksuit, red-faced and trembling. "You sabotaged me," she shrieked, pointing at the boulders. I didn't say a word, just stood with my arms crossed, watching the steam rise behind. She had walked into her own trap, and I had played by every rule. The neighborhood had never been so quiet. Karen stood there, frozen beside her wrecked Lexus, the engine ticking as it cooled. The front bumper collapsed like a crushed soda can against the largest boulder. Her dog barked hysterically from inside the car, but she ignored it. Her focus was on me. "You set me up," she screamed, voice shrill and echoing down the street. I stayed silent, letting her anger ricochet off the calm I'd carefully built. I didn't need to yell. The boulders spoke louder than I ever could. "This is entrapment. You're going to pay for this." I folded my arms. "You drove onto my lawn." "Again, I always drive there. Everyone knows that's a community easement, not according to county records. This is my property line." I paused. "You've been trespassing for weeks. You just finally hit something that didn't move." Her face flushed a dangerous red. She fumbled for her phone and began snapping photos. "Of the boulders. You think you're clever. I'm calling the cops. This is property sabotage. Please do." She blinked. I could see it the moment she realized she had no idea how to play this. 10 minutes later, a squad car rolled up. Officer Jordan, tall, even-tempered, and familiar with the neighborhood, stepped out. He looked at the car, then at the rocks, then at me. "Morning, folks." Karen launched into a breathless monologue about malicious intent, landscaping traps, and neighborhood safety hazards. Jordan listened, nodding occasionally, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he turned to me. "Got footage?" I handed him my phone, motion-triggered camera, full view of her turning the wheel, accelerating and slamming into the boulder. He watched the whole thing. When he handed the phone back, he sighed. "Ma'am, this isn't a sabotage. These are legally permitted landscape features. They're not hidden, not obstructing the road, and you drove directly onto private property. But he put them there because of me," she snapped. He arched an eyebrow. "You're admitting you've been using his lawn as a roadway. That's not the point." "It kind of is." She looked like she'd been slapped. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Officer Jordan pulled out a clipboard. "I'll file an incident report. You'll need to contact your insurance company. This is a civil matter, not criminal." But he can't just he did, and it's legal. You're lucky he's not pressing trespassing charges." Karen stood there, deflated. Her power, once so absolute, was beginning to crack. As the flatbed tow truck arrived to haul away her wounded vehicle, the neighbors came out, casual, curious, phones in hand. No one said a word, but the expressions were unmistakable. They'd all seen the petty fines, the passive-aggressive notices, the iron-fisted way she ran the HOA like a dictatorship. Now they were witnessing something new, called on accountability, and it wasn't just a private moment. A few hours later, a neighbor posted the footage online. "HOA Queen vs. Boulder Justice," the title read. Within hours, it spread like wildfire across the neighborhood Facebook page. The comment section lit up. "Greater than, she's been terrorizing us for years." Finally, someone stood up. Can we elect this guy president of the HOA? That's what you get when you ignore property lines, Karen. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. The story had outgrown me now. The next day a formal letter arrived from the HOA board, this time not on the usual templated stationery. It was hand-signed by Russ, the HOA president. Greater than due to recent events and concerns raised by multiple residents, the board is temporarily suspending Vice President Karen Mitchell from her position pending a formal review. Please know that the association does not condone the misuse of authority or disregard for personal property. It was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get. I read it twice, then I folded it and slid it into a drawer right next to all the violation notices she had ever sent me. That evening, I walked the lawn. The corner still bore the scars of her Lexus's final pass, but the boulders stood tall and moved unbudged. Sentinels of resistance. For the first time in months, the street felt balanced, but Karen wasn't done. People like her never just fade away, and part of me knew she would come back in grayer, more desperate, and with one last trick up her sleeve. Karen disappeared for 2 days. Her car was gone, her dog silent, her clipboard nowhere in sight. It was the quietest stretch Whispering Pines had seen in years, and no one complained. But quiet isn't the same as peace. Not when you know a storm is coming on the third morning. I opened my front door to a thick envelope shoved through the mail slot. No return address, just my name, typed in a stiff serif font. On side was a formal letter for pages long written by Karen. She was suing me. Not just a petty HOA complaint. This was an official civil action, filed through a local attorney she no doubt found by Googling property sabotage. The letter accused me of willful negligence, reckless endangerment, and deliberate infliction of emotional distress. She was seeking $8,400 in damages covering vehicle repairs, psychological harm, and public embarrassment due to online defamation. I nearly laughed, but the court date was real. The summons was legitimate. She wanted a courtroom showdown. I spent that afternoon preparing. Fortunately, I had everything: camera footage, photos, correspondence, violation letters, HOA bylaws, and even the signed acknowledgement from the board that my landscaping complied with regulation. Still, it gnawed at me. Not the legal risk. I knew her case was made of tissue paper, but the audacity. After all the harassment, all the manipulation, she wanted to play the victim. Fine letter. The hearing was scheduled for a Friday morning at the county municipal court. Neutral territory. No HOA allies. No boardroom whispers. Just facts, law, and consequences. She arrived wearing a power suit and a smug expression, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I came alone, file folder in hand, calm, focused. Karen opened with a tearful statement, complete with trembles and sighs. She painted herself as a longtime community leader, emotionally shattered by my calculated aggression. She claimed I had weaponized landscaping, that I'd designed the boulders to maim and publicly humiliate. Her lawyer nodded solemnly. The judge was less moved. Do you have documentation of previous warnings, property boundaries, or any evidence that the defendant intended harm? They didn't. When my turn came, I presented everything: the photos, the videos, the violation letters, the clause in the bylaws that allowed decorative elements, the HOA signed letter supporting my compliance. Then I played the security footage. The courtroom watched Karen's Lexus drive past the clearly visible boulders, veer off the street, and accelerate across my lawn straight into the rocks. Silence. Judge removed his glasses. Miss Mitchell, I see no evidence of wrongdoing by the defendant. In fact, it appears you repeatedly violated his property rights. Karen tried to object, but he knew I always took that route. That's exactly the problem. The judge cut in. This case is dismissed. And Ms. Mitch, you may want to consider how your actions reflect on your standing in your community. She sat down, stunned. For the first time, she had nothing to say. Outside the courtroom, I passed her in the parking lot. She refused to look at me. Her lawyer was already walking away. By the following week, the for sale sign went up in her front yard. Rumor was she'd resigned from the HOA board, voluntarily, though I suspect the board nudged her out with a polite but firm boot. Neighbors stopped me on walks, shook my hand, even dropped off cookies. I hadn't just fought Karen. I'd cracked something deeper: her spell over the neighborhood. The fear of crossing her was gone, and the boulders, they stayed. I added small flower beds around them, lavender and ornamental grass. The corner that once looked trampled and defeated now stood as a quiet, blooming monument. Not to victory, to boundaries, to standing your ground literally. Weeks later, I found a final note in my mailbox. No return address, just a single sentence, typed, "You think you won, but this isn't over." I smiled because it was.